Long before I had words for it, I knew something was wrong with certain people. My stomach would hurt when they were around. I didn't know the psychology yet. I just knew something felt off. It turns out there's a reason for that feeling, and it has everything to do with something I call fake nice. Why fake nice feels so confusing. Fake niceness creates a mismatch between your words, your tone, your behavior, and your private actions. It's called incongruence. An incongruence is when your face or your smile might convey one emotion and your actions convey something else. Such as soon as you leave the conversation, that person is whispering about you. They might be laughing. They might be acting like you essentially are bothering them in some way or rolling their eyes at you. Essentially dismissive gestures that would show you that even though they present as being nice, they're anything but. Fake nice people maintain politeness on the surface, but the pattern underneath tells a completely different story. Pattern 1, public charm and private cruelty. Let's talk about when we talk about somebody that is two-faced. And I know a lot of you are familiar with that concept, probably because you've dealt with a lot of people who are two-faced and you have that sixth spiny kind of sense that that person is not being authentic. Whereas they have a moment where they're nice to you as long as their friends aren't around, but as soon as they have friends around them, they immediately kind of distance themselves from you. You see them looking at you in a strange way. Maybe you see them whispering and pointing at you. Maybe you hear them laughing about you, whatever it may be. And so that is what you know as a two-faced person. They might be kind in public, but insulting in private. Supportive in front of others, but undermining behind the scenes. Getting other people to be against you as well, so that they don't have to be the only person who is essentially not being authentic. Fake niceness depends on witnesses. When the audience disappears, the mask often slips because they don't want to be by themselves. They want to be able to have friends too. They want people to think that they're nice, that they're kind, that they're who they say they are. Pattern 2, plausible deniability. This is why confronting them is so hard. Typical responses might be something along the lines of look, like, I didn't mean anything by this. Or almost like, hey, she's being crazy. Like, I have no idea what she was talking about. Their typical defense might be, I was just joking. You misunderstood. It was a joke. It was supposed to be funny. I thought you were laughing. You were smiling. You're too sensitive. That is not what I meant. And the line that you maybe counter with, fake niceness is powerful because it leaves the target questioning themselves. This is akin to gaslighting. This is akin to manipulation. This is akin to, everyone else knows me as a nice person. I don't know what's wrong with you. Maybe you're the person who doesn't like me. Projection, right? If all else fails. Because ultimately, depending on what is said, it's pretty clear when someone is joking, when you have understood them perfectly and you know that you've understood them perfectly. But a lot of us are conditioned to be agreeable. A lot of us are conditioned to accept what people say no matter what, even if we have that inkling that what they've said is wrong, that it's off. Because a lot of us who grew up in environments that were less than ideal, maybe that had some dysfunction or some roles that other people didn't necessarily understand, we've been taught that a lot of what we think sometimes we can't really trust. And so when you have someone saying, I was joking, oh yeah, that's a funny joke, or you misunderstood, or you're too sensitive, or that's not what I meant. Like, who are we to judge? We can't even trust ourselves sometimes, right? How many of you feel like that? I know that I struggle with that quite a bit frequently. And it's almost because I want to give somebody the benefit of the doubt. I know what it's like to be misjudged. I don't want to misjudge others, but at the same time, you know what you know. And I've ultimately come to a place that if I have a feeling about something, I'm going to trust it. And it's not me choosing myself over another person. It's me like, look, I experienced this. I have a pretty strong sense of intuition, and I'm a pretty good read of character, and I try to treat people the way that I want to be treated. So if someone is trying to be like passive aggressive or openly hostile, I'm pretty sure that most people can read that signal. And it's not necessarily a joke or a misunderstanding. Pattern 3, confusion as control. And this is a deeper psychological point that some of you may have experienced. The confusion surrounding this technique keeps a lot of people from acting on their instincts. When someone behaves in contradictory ways, your brain keeps trying to reconcile the two versions of them. There's the nice version of them, who you got along with and who you believe they were a good person, until all of a sudden it's like Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, right? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You literally had the moment where you're like, which one is real? I will tell you a story. I actually dated someone in high school who was very attentive, very sweet, very nice. We had gone to a dance together, and I really enjoyed his company. And he seemed to enjoy mine. Like, we both laughed a lot, had a great time. And then we had decided to go to a local fast food restaurant. And he all of a sudden, out of nowhere, called me a name, a nasty name, and curse word, actually, starting with a B. That's all I will say. And I remember being like, what? Like, I heard what you just said. And it was like, okay, well, I didn't say anything. I clearly heard what you just said. And you called me like a nasty name for whatever reason, I don't know. I didn't say any such thing. You must be hearing things. Well, I'm pretty sure that I heard correctly, because you are getting very kind of confrontational, and your voice is escalating, and your tone is getting very disrespectful. To which point was next said, if the shoe fits, then wear it. Which blew me away, because it literally happened so quickly that you have this moment where you've dated someone for a period of time. Yes, it was a short period of time, but they were one way, and then all of a sudden it's like a light switch, like it flips quickly, and you're like, what is going on? Like, what did I do wrong? Like, I didn't. And I think that's the problem with a lot of us who have dealt with things that have been less than positive. We tend to internalize it and make it about us. You know, what did I do wrong? What could I have done to de-escalate the situation? But looking back now, some 20 years later, I just think that that was in his character for whatever reason. I think that he was testing boundaries with me, meaning, was I going to stick up for myself, or was I going to take the abuse, which I feel like calling someone a nasty name for no reason is abusive. And at that time, I mean, it was difficult to stand up and say, you know what, this isn't right. This isn't how things work. You know, and ultimately I was able to discern that this person wasn't for me. Didn't take very long. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. This isn't happening. And ultimately, we know that our stomach seems to notice the problem before our mind does. Our mind takes a little bit of time to catch up. And ultimately, if somebody is going to treat you like that, and then, you know, say that you're hearing things, say that, you know, if the shoe fits, wear it, which I think is a very snarky comment, then it's someone who is likely going to continue to escalate the behavior because they feel like they are entitled to be nasty to other people. Just my personal 2 cents. So let's talk about the fact of what would happen in the law, looking at the legal lens. In the law, we don't evaluate a single statement. We look at patterns of behavior over time. For instance, are you always the person that stops at a particular coffee shop every morning before you go to work? That is a pattern for you. You do that every single time. Are you a person who always wears your seatbelt? The law allows for certain specific pattern behaviors sometimes. So, for instance, if you're always the person that stops at Starbucks before you go to your job, if you're always the person who wears a seatbelt, if you're always the person who doesn't speed, you go right the speed limit, those are things that could potentially be admissible as habit evidence, right? And so we look at your pattern of behavior over a period of time. And ultimately, this is a really good idea for people that you newly are learning or getting to know, to look at what seems like their pattern. Are they generally a nice person, or are they a fake nice person? Because a lot of us have that internal instinct, that intuition, that kind of sixth sense of what's right and what's not right. And fake niceness becomes very obvious once you start looking at their patterns, how they speak to other people, how they speak to people who they may feel superior to, because a lot of people turn on the fake niceness in that area, thinking that people aren't going to notice. However, it's pretty easy to tell when someone is invested and when someone is just kind of playing a part or trying to impress someone else. And ultimately, I'm a big proponent of, what goes around comes around, because ultimately I think you need to treat people with respect, and you need to treat people the way that you want to be treated, which I strive to do. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. Would I love to be? Absolutely. But none of us are perfect. But I think we do the best that we can. And when we fall short, we can always apologize for that. Hey, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't mean to sound this certain way. And I think that takes a lot of courage to be able to acknowledge that, hey, we all make mistakes at times. So once you start looking at patterns, you see who are the fake nice people and who the people are just having, you're not just looking at isolated moments where they've been nice. Because oftentimes they want something from you. Case in point, I had a car accident when I was 16 years old with one of the cheerleaders in my class. Very interesting experience. Not a fun experience, I will say. My whole thing is I've always been a big kind of dork in a way, and I had read that most new drivers have an accident like within 3 months of getting their license. Well, I wanted to beat that statistic. Well, thanks to Little Miss Cheerleader, I was not able to beat that statistic, and she was probably one of the most popular cheerleaders in my class. So that killed my social life. Who cares? I don't really care about stuff like that, honestly. I have my friends, and I was happy with my friends, but nonetheless. So we were at Teardown for one of the plays, and she actually asked me, she was like, does your little neck hurt? And I was like, yeah, it does, because I've been getting shots, and everything. And she's like, and then all of a sudden she like flipped, like Frankenstein kind of thing, like the whole like flip, kind of like the other story I told you. And she flipped and she said, you turn your neck. And I'm like, well, of course I turn my neck. I have to turn my neck. I have to turn my neck to drive. And of course I was wearing this big like collar, that you have when you have a neck injury. She's like, do you want me to videotape you? And I'm like, you can do whatever you want. I said, but I do have to, I do have to turn my neck. And I said, I tell you what, if I were faking, I said, there's the needle like that long that is going into my neck, and it's gone into my neck like 3 times. So if I were faking, that is the point that I would say, oh no, I'm not doing this anymore, So then at the end of all that, it was time for us to get ready to go. And she walked up to the stage. Our high school has like this huge stage, like an auditorium kind of thing. And she announced that she was being sued by me, my family, because my family, she said, was poor or whatever. And I said, well, we're neither rich nor poor. It doesn't really matter. But I was explaining to people, maybe this was my start as an attorney. I don't know. my whole thing was I explained that when you cause a car accident by running a yield sign, that you are responsible, your insurance company is actually responsible for paying the damages. And so every time anyone would ask her about the yield sign, she would say, yield means get out of my way. And I was like, clearly, that's probably why you hit me, So ultimately, you realize when people are wanting something from you, especially when they're trying to be over the top nice, when they've been really nasty to you in previous interactions. So that's definitely a clear sign. If you have ever had that feeling as a child, that something about someone just didn't make sense, you weren't imagining it. Your instincts were noticing a mismatch. And our brains, our human brains, are really good at figuring out what goes together and what does not. A nasty tone does not go very well with a big smile, unless they're trying to do gotcha moments. And I don't know how many of you like gotcha moments, because I really don't myself, but I think that there's a lot of people, that's kind of like a low blow, is my personal opinion on that. So in closing, authentic people are consistent. Their words and their actions match. You can tell from their tone. You can tell from their eye contact. You can tell by how they tell the truth and how they actually seem genuinely interested in what you're saying rather than performing for someone else. Fake nice people rely on the gap between the two, the mismatch in words and actions. Okay, let me ask you this question. Have you ever had that gut feeling about someone where something felt off, but you couldn't explain why? What eventually helped you understand it? Feel free to comment on the message board once I get it posted. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I appreciate it a lot that you're tuning in and supporting our channel. And thanks for tuning in to Recovering Perfectionist Mama, Grace in Progress. If this was your first time joining us, welcome. Happy to have you. If you're a returning viewer, also welcome back. Happy to have you as well. So thanks so much, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.